Good afternoon everyone, welcome to the AdiSat network. Today's topic of discussion is the later Vedic period. And for this we have with us in the studio Dr. O.P. Singh, Associate Professor, University of Delhi. His specialization includes ancient Indian history and archaeology. He has a teaching experience of more than 15 years of teaching undergraduate students. It's a pleasure to have you here, sir. Welcome.
Thank you, Vasi, and very good afternoon to all viewers. So, viewers, we continue with the series of lecture that we started yesterday, and yesterday our discussion was on Rig Vedic or early Vedic period. In the same series, we shall discuss today the later Vedic period. The chronology for the same lies between 1000 to 600 BC, and during these 600 years, we shall try to highlight the important features or characteristics of the economy, society, and the polity of the later Vedic period. Now, as we saw yesterday, the economy of Rig Vedic period was pastoral in nature. There was some amount of agriculture being done, but by and large, it was a pastoral economy. Now, when we come down to later Vedic times, what you find that during this period there is widening of horizon on the one hand, and at the same time there is also a shift in the economic ways. Widening in the horizon in the sense that the Rig Vedic people were located in northwest India, whereas during later Vedic times they start moving on towards the east, and they have occupied area up to mid-Gangetic plain and even beyond. Now, as far as economic development is concerned, what we have during this period is that now the emphasis on pastoralism was replaced by agriculture, but nevertheless pastoralism was still being practiced, which is evident from a few rituals as discussed in contemporary literature, and it was not completely replaced. Only the focus has shifted to agriculture from pastoralism, and nevertheless, by and large, it was primarily an agricultural economy, and pastoralism was just a secondary economic activity. Now, the things that we shall be discussing here are largely based on the sources which are more in number as compared to the Rig Vedic times. Whereas during Rig Vedic times we had only one source, and that too only literary source, that was the Rig Veda. During later Vedic times we have a number of sources which include the other three Vedas, that is the Samaved, the Yajurved, and the Atharvaved. The Brahmanas here it is referred to a category of literature that is that developed during this time. Then the Aranyakas, the Upanishads, and apart from it, we are fortunate enough to have some archaeological sources as well during later Vedic times to corroborate the information obtained from the literary sources. Basically, this period belongs to a particular archaeological culture that is referred as the PGW or painted grey ware culture, and throughout North India, archaeologists have discovered more than about 700 sites which have yielded the remains of PGW culture. Now, as we have already seen, rather we have already said that during this period the main economic activity of the Aryans was agriculture, and this growing importance of agriculture can be attested from a number of sources, including the Rig Veda, in fact a later portion of the Rig Veda, which refers to various kind of agricultural operations such as sowing, cutting, threshing, and winnowing of grain. In this context, we can also mention that contemporary literature has reference to the plows, and we have references of plows which were drawn by 6, 8, 12 or even 24 oxen. In fact, this reference comes from the Satpat Brahman, which is a very important contemporary literature. Now, this reference of 6 to 24 oxen it may be symbolic, because it looks unlikely to use 6 to 24 oxen to plow a field, and that too during those days. It may be symbolic, but at the same time it may also indicate it indicates towards the possibility of deep plowing as well. So because the land was just being cleared of the forest, and there was a necessity of deep plowing of the field for making the field fertile, so or rather cultivable. So probably this number of oxen might have been used in actual plowing as well. Now, because agriculture was the main economic activity, and for agriculture there was a necessity to clear the field of the vegetation. The vegetation of the Gangetic plain was not very thick, but it was decently denser. Now, this field was cleared with the help of available technology. Now, there is some debate regarding the clearance of field, whether the iron technology was used in this clearing of field or not, and that debate is a different matter altogether. But the available technology, which was bronze based technology, seems to have been used by and large for clearing of these fields, apart from use of fire. Now, this use of fire is evident from certain incidents, rather stories discussed in the contemporary literature. For example, there is one story related to King Videh Madhav, who is said to have established, rather cleared the field with the help of fire of the entire Gangetic plain up to eastern India. But nevertheless, there are a few references where it seems that iron was being used, and not only that, in fact, an iron plowshare has also been recovered from a place called Nuh. This place is basically in northern India, and this belongs to 1100 to 900 BC. So it may be of Rigvedic times, it may be of later Vedic times, early later Vedic times, but it belongs to this period. So though there are not much iron agricultural weapons, rather iron agricultural tools that can be ascribed to later Vedic time, but the possibility of use of iron tools can also not be neglected or discarded at this point of time. Though it can be definitely said that the frequency of iron tools is not higher. Now, as far as agriculture is concerned, it was the main economic occupation, and if we look at the list of the crops that were grown during later Vedic times, it is very impressive. In fact, what you have that both archaeological as well as literary sources indicate towards the increase in crop pattern as compared to the Rigvedic times. Whereas during Rigvedic times there was only one crop that was grown, and that is also mentioned in the Rig Veda, and that was barley. But during this period we have literary evidence as well as archaeological evidence to suggest that a number of crops were being grown, and they include, as I said, both Rabi and Kharif crops. So though yavar or barley still continue to be important, but a new grain called vrihi, V-R-I-H-I, vrihi, assumed greater significance. Now this vrihi is basically rice, and the remains of rice along with barley have been obtained from Ataranji Kheda and Hastinapur. These are archaeobotanical remains of rice and barley, and these have been obtained from Ataranji Kheda, where an important painted graveware site which is located near Hastinapur, which is near Meerut, in fact, in western Uttar Pradesh. But at this point of time, though rice was cultivated, but the transplantation of rice was not practiced yet, so yield was definitely very less. Now other grains mentioned during later Vedic times included Godhum, which was the wheat, and it was relatively insignificant at that time. Now texts also refer to Mudg or Mung, and Masa or Urad, Tila or Sismam, and sugar cane. So what we have during later Vedic times in the contemporary literature is variety of crops, and the grains that I referred just now, that is Mung, Urad, Til and sugarcane, again the archaeobotanical evidence of all these have been obtained from Hastinapur. So by and large they were definitely growing all sort of Rabi and Kharif crop. Now the growing importance of agriculture definitely necessitated some change in the organization of production. We have seen that during Rig Vedic times, because the economy was pastoral and agriculture was not important, so there was no concept of private property in land. But when during later Vedic times people settled down, they started agriculture, it became their main occupation, so the importance of land increased and the concept of land ownership begins to emerge during this time, though it was still in nebulous stage, because we do not find any prayer for land in any sacrificial context. Because what we have during sacrifices, this is the period which was highly ritualistic in nature and sacrificial in nature, and during sacrifices gifts were made, but most of the gifts were still cows and cattle, and we hardly find any reference that the people, rather the Brahmanas who took these gifts, they asked for land instead of cows or cattle. Now as far as right over land is concerned, the right, though it was settled territory, it was the control of a ruler, it was the control of a monarch, so the authority of the state was the supreme. But as far as right over wish is concerned, the contemporary literature suggests that this probably, contemporary literature, especially Satpat Brahman, suggests that probably the state owned the land, but in fact the ultimate right of ownership lied with the wish, that is the masses, because Satpat Brahman suggests that the Chhatra, that is the ruler, cannot grant any land without permission of the wish. So some sort of communal ownership over the land still seems to have lingered on, which had already started during later Vedic time, Rig Vedic time. Then the basic unit of production was the patrilineal household, that was Griha. It was the basic unit of agricultural production, and this shows an important shift from communal ownership to individual ownership, because here the chief of the house, that is chief of the Grih, that is Grihpati, emerged as the de facto owner of the land during later Vedic times. But should always be cautious about using this term, as the concept of ownership of land was still in a nebulous stage. It has just started crystallizing. Now, as far as crafts are concerned, the Rig Vedic period, we had very few crafts and very few people associated with the craftsmanship. Now during later Vedic times, there is a significant change in the evidence of craft, because so many crafts seem to have emerged, and that is naturally a byproduct of the change in the nature of economy, because the economy was very simple during Rig Vedic times, so there was hardly any scope of any craft being practiced, whereas during later Vedic times, when the economy becomes complex, it becomes agricultural based, we have so many crafts. And there is another important technological intervention also at this point of time, though iron was being used since late early Vedic period. But during this time, there is some evidence of use of iron to some greater extent, because contemporary literature has the terms Krishna Ayas and Syam Ayas. Now, Krishna Ayas, Ayas is translated as metal and Krishna is translated as black. Similarly, Syam is translated as black and Ayas is translated as metal. So, this is something related to black metal, and that black metal was actually iron. Now, apart from it, the contemporary literature also talks about Dhamatri. Dhamatri, who is an smelter. It also talks about Karmar, who was smith, and it also provides information about Bhastra, which was basically below that is used by the iron smiths to make iron tools. Now, as far as literary evidence is concerned, we have all these references, but interestingly, we have also some archaeological evidence as well to suggest that this, in fact, Bhastra was being used, and for that we have archaeological evidence. Bhastra was being used at least at one place in Suneri in Rajasthan. So, because archaeological evidence of Bhastra has been obtained from that site. But nevertheless, the impact of iron technology was very limited during this period, because we have preponderance of war weapons over tools. We have swords, we have spears, we have daggers, but we hardly have household tools or agricultural tools made of iron. So, though iron technology was there, but the impact of iron technology on the contemporary economy cannot to be very significant. The importance of iron technology was there, but it was not the most important technology, or it was not the prime mover of the economy or technology as it has been suggested by some scholars. Now, apart from metallurgy, apart from rather iron metallurgy, we have also reference of gold, bronze, copper as well, because Vajasneyi Samhita talks about all these metals. It talks about yellow metal, it talks about the red metal, that is copper, and it suggests the increase in the metallurgical technology that had started during later Vedic times. Now, apart from this iron technology and other metal technology, we have evidence of manufacture of glass as well, because glass is mentioned in the contemporary literature as Kaach, K-A-C-H-A, Kaach. Now, it's not only that the contemporary literature mentions about glass, but in fact, we have discovered, rather this archaeologists have discovered a number of glass bangles and glass beads from various painted graveyard sites that belong to the later Vedic times. Now, the craft specialization definitely was of greater significance as compared to the Rigvedic times. Then, as far as earlier economic activities are concerned, just as in the case of Rigvedic times, we had seen that weaving was practiced by women in the household. It seems that the women still continued to be occupied with the practice of women, and it was probably women-centric occupation. Was contemporary literature suggests that women still practiced what you call weaving, and it was a household activity. Now, as far as system of redistribution is concerned, which was a very important economic aspect of Rigvedic times, it has seemed to be undergone a drastic change during later Vedic times. The redistribution, especially of Loptri during Rigvedic times, which was a very important economic activity, seemed to have lost its importance. Now, why this decrease in importance of Loptri? The answer can be sought in the nature of economy that emerged during later Vedic times, because when Lop3 was important, it was important because the economy was pastoral and it was not sufficient to take care of the needs of the people and the society. So the people indulge in looting and redistribution of that loot, that is called Lop3. But when economy becomes agriculture based, when the economy becomes agrarian, people got involved in this economy, and this economy was probably taking care of the needs of the people. So people no longer required that Lop3, so they did not go for any loot, and naturally it was again not redistributed. Now, as far as redistribution is concerned, it's not that it was only Lop3 that was redistributed, and with the decrease in importance in Lop3, this process of redistribution came to an end. No, it's not like that, because socially the economic activities under the control of the Vaishya people, and naturally the two upper varnas, that is Brahmanas and Kshatriyas, they were probably not participating in the process of production. So they depended on redistribution only, and what we have, rather the indications suggest, literary indications suggest that the larger share of redistribution, to whatever extent it was taking place, was taken by the two upper varnas. So the tendency of unequal distribution of property that had started during Rigvedic times only, it further accentuated during later Vedic times. Now, if we recall study lecture, we had discussed Bali as well. Now, Bali was a voluntary offering during Rigvedic times. During later Vedic times, the nature of Bali changes. Now it becomes obligatory, though still it was not a tax. It was not a regular tax as yet, but there was slight change in the nature, that whereas the Bali was voluntary during Rigvedic times, now it becomes obligatory. So there is some kind of obligation on the people to offer Bali to their chief or to their king. Sometimes it seems that probably the Bali was also obtained through force. So Bali was obtained through force during Rigvedic times as well, but it was obtained forcibly from hostile tribes, whereas during later Vedic times it seems that the people of the tribe of the king also, the people of the tribe of king were also forced to pay Bali, because sometimes in contemporary literature the king is called Vismat, which literally means eater of vish. So one who is eating the share of the vish or the masses is the king or the Vismat. Now, so here we can see that on the one hand there is decrease in the importance of Lop3, on the other hand there is an increase in the nature of Bali, rather in the importance of Bali. Now this increasing importance of Bali was partly due to decreasing importance of Lop3 and partly due to increasing surplus production as well, because now the people were practicing agriculture and it was probably yielding good amount of grain, so people probably had some surplus to share it with the king, and that is why the importance of Lop3 decreases and importance of Bali increases, because now if there is surplus with the people, the ruler would like to take that surplus, not necessarily as a tax, but by using some mechanism from the people in the form of Bali. Now, whatever income was there with the king or with the state, it was acquired through Bali, it was acquired partly through Lop3 as well, though on a very limited scale. And this income was partly used in sacrificial offerings, because this was a period when sacrifices became very important, sacrifices became very elaborate, sacrifices became very necessary for the legitimacy of the authorities. So, frequent sacrifices were conducted and the bali obtained was offered in sacrifices, it was used in the feasts, it was partly used in dakshina to the priests, and thus what we find that this led to some sort of greater concentration of wealth in the hand of upper two varnas, because bali was obtained by the chief, part of it was spent by him, part of it was spent on the sacrifices and feasts, and part of it was given to the priest, rest was kept by him. So, these two groups, two upper varnas, brahmanas and kshatriyas, seem to have acquired a larger wealth, and the wealth seems to have concentrated, seems to have rather started concentrating in the hands of the two upper varnas. Now, there is some development in the field of trade as well during this period, because during later Vedic times we have very clear and explicit reference of sea. Though samudra, the term samudra also occurs in the Rig Veda, but there it denotes just a collection of water, whereas during later Vedic times all the seas surrounding India are explicitly mentioned by their name. So, it suggests some sort of contact of the people with outlying areas. Now, as far as trade is concerned, the trade necessitates some sort of medium of exchange as well. Now, again, the contemporary literature has certain references like terms, references in the there are some differences which include the terms like niska, N-I-S-H-K-A, niska. Then there are some references that include satman. Now, niska is probably a gold ornament, but probably it also represents a fixed weight of metal. Satman is a weight of gold or silver. Now, these two terms, nisk and satman, have been interpreted by some scholars as coins. Some scholars interpret nisk as a gold coin and satman as a silver coin. But in the light of unavailability of any gold or silver coins from the painted graveyard sites, this argument cannot be accepted. So, it seems that this exchange was basically through barter system only, and there was no money economy in use. Now, change in economy leading to some amount of surplus production, leading to some amount of trade, was also affecting the economy of the region, and then that is reflected in the form of emergence of certain towns. Though this was not the period when we have full-fledged urbanization, because second urbanization is a phenomena that occurred during 6th century BC, but the process of urbanization seems to have started. Because in the latest part of the literature, we have references of some nagaras. Now, these nagaras, which are referred in contemporary literature, included Ahichhatra, that is near Bareilly, Kausambi, that is near Allahabad, and Hastinapur, that is near Meerut. So, these places are referred as nagar, but archaeological material or the material culture belonging to this period does not seem to suggest that it was a full-fledged urban center. So, it seems that basically these were political centers rather than centers of manufacturing or centers of trade, but nevertheless emergence and existence and reference of such centers, which were centers of activities other than agriculture, might indicate some sort of socio-economic differentiation, and this can be said to be the proto-cities which developed or flourished in the cities during 6th century BC. So, what we have as far as economy of the Rigvedic period is concerned, that there is a number of changes that were taking place, and these important changes made significant changes in the field of society, in the arena of polity, that we shall discuss henceforth. Now, there is some another important reference that I wanted to share with you as far as economy is concerned, though as we said that Bali during later Vedic times was not a regular tax, but there is reference of an official called Bhagdugh. Bhagdugh was the person who is said to have collected this Bali and deposited it with a person called Sangrahitri. But still, it was not a regular tax. Probably it was taken 1/10 to 1/12 of the produce, but it was not a regular tax at this point of time. Now, simpler economy, simpler society during Rigvedic times. Economy gets complexer, and similarly, society also gets complexer during later Vedic times. Because what we have that the relative egalitarian structure of Rigvedic society in fact gave way to the complex society. There were differences, and these differences can be seen in various contexts of later Vedic society. The first important change that we witnessed in later Vedic society is that the society came to be divided along Varna line. Though the reference of the Varnas occurs in the Rig Veda itself, but it occurs in the later part of the Rig Veda. It is in fact in the 10th mandal of the Rig Veda, and this is a mandal that was included in the Rig Veda during later Vedic times. So, actually it was composed during later Vedic times but added in the Rig Veda, but nevertheless this 10th mandala is considered to be, in spite of being part of Rig Veda, 10th mandala is considered to be a composition of later Vedic times. So, whatever information is there in the 10th mandala is basically related to later Vedic times. Now, here in 10th mandala there is a hymn or Sukta called Purush Sukta. This Purush Sukta refers for the first time about the four Varnas, which says that it was from the mouth of the primeval man or Manu that Brahmin was born. It was from the hands that the Kshatriya was born. It was from the abdominal part that a Vaishya was born, and it was from his feet that a Sudra was born. Now, as far as this classification of or division of society on the basis of Varna is concerned, it also relates to some sort of arrangement on the basis of color, because the two upper Varnas being more privileged, having more rights in the society, were considered to be the most important, rather they were considered to be the most important section of the society. They were considered to be fair, tall and handsome, with straight hairs and sharp nose, etc., etc. Whereas the local people who were considered short-heighted and dark complexioned and curly haired and snub-nosed, etc., with protruded lips and all, so they were considered to be the indigenous population, and this seems to be a division only on the basis of color. But and as we know that Varna also literally means color, but in fact it was also an attempt to weave together the diverse elements of the society and run the society smoothly. However, some sort of functional division of this Varna-based society can also be seen, because a Brahmin is born out of mouth, so a Brahmin will not perform any menial job. He will only earn his living by mouth only. So what will he do? He will teach, he will read, and he will perform sacrifices, and then he will get gift. The Kshatriya is born out of hand, So he is expected to protect the people, because just as our hand automatically protects any attack on ourselves, so Kshatriya is born out of hand, so Kshatriya is expected to protect the people. Now abdomen, it's our in fact entire system moves on the basis of food that we eat. So Vaisya is said to have born out of abdomen, so he will be taking care of the abdomen, so he will be taking care of the production. And feet, of which Sudra is shown to be born. And now it is suggested that just as feet takes care of the entire body, just as the feet carries the weight of the entire body, similarly just as the feet serves the entire body, the Sudras are expected to serve the three upper varnas. But these are various interpretations. What is important is that this was a division of the society through which it was expected by the lawgivers and the ideologues of the time, that is Brahmanas. Definitely they gave the most important position for themselves, but it was an attempt to run the society smoothly, though it cannot be said to be unbiased. Now, as far as the origin of Brahmanas is concerned, the origin of Brahmanas itself is shrouded in mystery, because when we look at Rigvedic times, there were 16 categories of priests and Brahmanas were just one of them. But when we come to later Vedic times, all the priests are called Brahmanas. Now this happened, why and how we do not know, because we have no sources to suggest. But the fact is that all the priests were included in Brahman category or Brahman Varna only, whereas the Brahmanas were just one category of fish during Rigvedic times. Now similarly, as I said, the origin of Brahmanas seems to have shrouded in mystery, because this I am saying on the basis that the important sages of Vedic times, Vasishtha and Agastya, they seem to have, rather they are suggested to have been born out of earthen pot or jar. No, naturally it's not possible for somebody to be born out of a jar or earthen pot. So there is some mystery that is trying to be that is the lawgivers are trying to not divulge, and it seems what can be suggested in the light of such evidence, and also in the case of Dirgha Tamas. Dirgha literally means large and Tamas means black. So a person who is called Dirgha Tamas literally means extremely black or jet black. But he was a very important sage of Rigvedic times. Now if he was black, then he was definitely not an Aryan, but still he was a very important sage. So what is suggested that in fact in this category, in the category of the Brahmanas, various indigenous priestly groups or important people were also included, and they were given the status of Brahmanas. Now another important social institution during later Vedic times is that of Gotra, which developed, and people started practicing Varna endogamy and Gotra exogamy. The family, which was in fact patriarchal during Rigvedic times itself, it further strengthened, it increasingly became more patriarchal, because if you look at the contemporary literature and if you look at the references for women in the contemporary literature, it seems that some sorts of restrictions were being imposed, or in fact the position of women was deteriorating during later Vedic times as compared to the Rigvedic times, because Aitareya Brahman, a contemporary literature, says that a good woman is one who does not talk back. Now it also says, another contemporary literature, it says that a girl child is the cause of girl child is cause of misery. And in another literature, still another literature, the women have been classified as one of the three vices with dice and wine. So there is some deterioration in the status of women, but nevertheless, even during this period, the status of women was not that bad as it happened during later times, because still there were no child marriages. The marriage age, though it was 15 to 16 and not very good from the modern standard, but it was a decent marriageable age from the point of view of ancient perspective. Similarly, we have some important women who had access to the education and ritual tradition, and in this context the name of Gargi and Maitreyi can be mentioned. So, these are some evidence where the position of women, where it seems that the position of women had started deteriorating. Now, another important change in the social institution during later Vedic times seems to be that of amalgamation of Aryan and non-Aryan social traditions. Because as we discussed yesterday, when the Aryans came to this part of the world, they were trying to maintain their racial purity, and they did not want to interact with the local population, because they thought that their blood will get impure and their race will be distorted. So, they maintained a distance and they developed some kind of hatred for the local population. But during later Vedic period, what you find, and it was very natural that after living together in the same area for a very long time, interaction was inevitable, and these interactions were leading to mutual give and take. And one example of this mutual give and take can be said to be some influence of matrilineal element on the Brahmanical or Aryan tradition, because Aryan society, Rig Vedic society, later Vedic society, which was primarily Aryan society, was patrilineal society, but here we find some influence of matrilineal society as well, because we find that wives of kings and in fact wives of kings rather, they were assigned some important status in sacrifices, especially like Rajasuya sacrifice, which was not completed without the intervention of without the assistance of the chief king. So, in all in all this context, with the new kind of economy, with the changed social scenario, which was now Varna based, the kind of polity that develops was also different as compared to the Rig Vedic times. Now, whereas during Rig Vedic times the control of the ruler was over its people and not over its territory, but when we come to later Vedic times and when the concept of private property emerges, what we find that the rule of the authority also shifts from people to territory. So now it was a territory over which a king or a chief ruled and not just its people. Another important change in later Vedic times in the field of polity can be seen in the area of growth of royal power. Now, this growth of royal power is seen because of a number of factors. First, it was because of amalgamation of various tribes, because what we have during later Vedic times, that various Rig Vedic tribes came together and they formed a territory, they formed a kingdom and settled down. And a very significant example in this context can be that of the Bharatas and the Purus, two important tribes of the Rig Vedic times, which came together and formed a new tribe called Kuru. So, with amalgamation of tribes, you have enlargement of the tribe and also enlargement of the territory, and larger territory was under the control of the chief, greater number of people were under the control of the chief. So naturally the chief was a representative, or the king was a representative of a larger territory or greater number of people. Now further this strength of the king was added by elaborate sacrifices, because during later Vedic times you find a number of sacrifices which were related to kingdom or kingship. Now sacrifices were performed during Rigvedic times as well, but those sacrifices were very simple, because every householder could perform a sacrifice within his household with whatever was available at his home. He could offer it to the god Agni, and it was expected that Agni will take that offering to the desired god or goddess. But during later Vedic times the sacrifices became very elaborate. Now there were sacrifices which lasted for years. In fact, one sacrifice which lasted for 2 to 12 years in fact. So these sacrifices were basically introduced to distinguish the king from the masses. One such sacrifice was Ashwamedh sacrifice that was started to establish his supremacy over his neighbors. Then there was another sacrifice, Vajpaya, in which the king established his own supremacy over his own people. So by introducing such sacrifices, by starting such sacrifices, by performing such sacrifices, which of course was not performed and it was not possible for an ordinary person to perform it, the king started distinguishing himself from rest of the population, and thus you find that the king actually becomes more important. Now increase in the royal authority is coupled with the decrease in the importance of the committees of Rigvedic times, because when there was control of the king over the people, there were certain committees like Samiti, which kept a check on the authority of the king. But when we come to later Vedic times, it was not possible to summon all the people to discuss any matter. So the committees like Sabha and Samiti and Vidat, which were there and assisting the king and also keeping a check over the authority of the king, they were no longer of any use. It was not possible to, in fact it was practically not possible to have a discussion with such a large population. So importance of committee decreases, and along with it the practice of hereditary kingship that had already started during Rigvedic times, it further strengthened and the rule of primogeniture was established. So by and large what we see that from Rigvedic times to later Vedic times there were a number of significant changes in the field of economy, from pastoral economy to agrarian economy, from occupation based society to Varna based society, from rule over people to rule over territory. But still, whether it was the polity or it was the economy or it was the society had been divided on the basis of Varna, but it was not very complex as yet, because we do not have evidence of untouchability during later Vedic times so far. And we have on the other hand, we have evidence that the king and the masses or the vis, they ate from the same vessel.
Okay.
So this untouchability is a feature or a phenomena that starts during.
Sir, sorry to disturb you, but we have a caller from UP who wants to ask a question.
Yeah, in fact, I am closing my lecture. So this is all I had to say about the later Vedic times.
Can we have the question, please?
Yes, ma'am. My question is, what type of ritual performed to strengthen their position in the later Vedic period?
Can you please repeat?
Yes, ma'am. I repeat. What type of ritual performed by king to strengthen their position in the later Vedic period?
Okay, what type of rituals are performed by kings to strengthen their position in the later Vedic period?
I just said that they performed Rajasuya, that established their control over their supremacy over their neighbors, in which a horse was at the end of the sacrifice they freed a horse, and the area to wherever it went unchallenged, the area was considered to be under the control of that king. Similarly, Vajpayee was a sacrifice in which the king was made to drink some, solution, and it was expected that it will give some divine power or some supernatural power to the king, so he will become powerful and important. So these were some of the rituals that were performed. Vajpayee, Rajasuye, Narmed, Harswamed, so many sacrifices.
Okay. I hope your question was answered. And sir, did anything really happen when you mentioned they used to drink some kind of potion and it would strengthen them? But did it really work?
Scientifically, it cannot happen.
Right.
By giving some potion, you can improve somebody's health, but you cannot,
increase one's power, authority.
Some supernatural power or authority, you cannot infuse some power of that sort in a person.
Absolutely, right. So, sir, I wanted to ask you a question, that all of these changes that came about, say from the Rig Vedic to the later Vedic period, and we have discussed various factors such as earlier there was pastoralism, and then focus was shifted to agriculture, and Varnas were introduced, and so on. We have discussed various things, and position of women, although it did not deteriorate too much, there was also a lot of improvement, and they were included also in the sacrifices, the wives of kings. So, could you tell us a few factors how this change happened from Rig Vedic to later Vedic? What allowed these developments?
See, first look at the time span. It's a time span of 600 years.
Right.
Very long time.
Very long time.
So many things were happening in the field of economy. It's for the convenience of a study that we discuss economy, polity and society separately.
Right. So we could discuss this, but you have a caller, caller from Odisha. Yes?
Okay, now I can ask question.
Yeah, please ask your question.
Okay, now I can ask question.
Yes.
Okay, sir.
Please reduce the volume of your television.
About that metal.
Sir, please keep the volume from the DJ. Hello, are you still there? Oh, it got disconnected. Sir, then we can resume our discussion.
In fact, we are discussing.
So you were mentioning that in between there is a gap of 600 years.
600 years is a very long period. One. Second, now it's for the convenience of our study that we study economy separately, or we discuss economy separately, society separately, and politics separately. But in fact, these are all interconnected.
Yes, absolutely.
Any development or any change in one field has its impact or repercussion on the others. So the kind of economy that you have will lead to a different kind of society.
Yes.
That society and economy will lead to a different kind of polity. The kind of people who are there in polity will affect the economy.
Absolutely.
That what shape it will take. So over a period of time, everything was changing, and since the society was getting complexer from simpler, so all these things were inevitable. This is one aspect. Another aspect, Aryans were outsiders. They were trying to protect their identity. They were trying to protect their race. They were trying to protect their racial purity by not interacting with the local population. But after living for more than, start with 1500 BC when the Aryans came to India and come down to 600 BC, during this 1000 or 1100 years or so, it was inevitable that the interaction will take place.
Definitely.
You cannot stop it. So interactions will take place. It will not be an unilateral interaction. It will be bilateral interaction. Things will be, things, ideas, cultural practices will be exchanged. And that is what you see, that you have some matrilineal influence because of the local population. You have Brahmanical influence on the local people, because ultimately what you have is that Brahmanization or Aryanization of the entire North India.
So you mentioned that although the Varnas were created, they were not very strongly implemented. Is that so?
Yes. society was divided along border lines, but what I mentioned is that the untouchability was not there.
Right, right.
It developed during later times,
Later
post-Vedic times, Mauryan
Okay.
and post-Mauryan times.
Right, sir.
Yes.
Sir, we are getting a call from Kerala. Yes, please ask your question.
Sir, we want to know more from metallurgy.
We are not able to hear you.
Technology.
Can you speak louder, please?
I want to know more on metallurgy. Metallurgy.
Metallurgy. What about metallurgy?
There is extraction
Oral
of metal from
methodology.
metal ore.
No, he's talking about metallurgies. What is his question?
Can you please repeat your question, sir?
We want to know more about the metallurgy. Metallurgy.
Yes, more
Wants
about
to know
metallurgy.
More about metallurgy. Exactly
yeah.
what
Can
do
you
want to know?
specify what aspect you want to know about?
And what kind, it is Vedic people or iron metal.
Can you please repeat once more? We are sorry for the trouble. What about metallurgy? Oh, it got disconnected. We are very sorry about that. I hope you can keep calling and be more clear this time. Do we have
No, but
another
we
caller?
can still talk about metallurgy. Yeah.
No more questions? Okay, okay. Yeah, yes, sir. Please continue.
Yeah, in fact, metallurgy, as far as technology is concerned, to begin with, Vedic period, early Vedic period or Rig Vedic period was bronze technology. It was a bronze age. But at the same time, at the end of Rig Vedic times or at the beginning of later Vedic times, we have archaeological evidence to suggest, coming from northwest India, that iron was being used. Now, use of iron is something else, and effective use of that technology is something else. Iron was produced, iron was used, iron weapons were produced, but whether that iron was used in the process of production or not, that is more important. Now, when that iron is effectively used in the process of production, we have a different scenario altogether as far as economy is concerned. By 3rd century AD, by 3rd century or 2nd century BC, we have extensive use of iron technology, even in the process of production. And that is the period when we have the largest amount of scale of economic development, when you have flourishing of towns, you have trade, foreign trade, flourishing trade, you have tremendous amount of coins, bullions, trade with Roman world taking place. The peak of urbanization, the peak of trade is witnessed during that period. So, as far as available technology is concerned, it was bronze technology, but since bronze is not a very strong metal, so it was not possible to cut the trees, and it was not possible to make hoes with the bronze so that deep digging could be done for the purpose of agriculture. But still, that technology, as long as necessity is concerned, because technology is also used according to necessity. Probably the population was less, so that technology was not used in the process of agriculture. They were okay with the burning of forests, and they could create their field.
Okay.
They could make it cultivable.
Right, so they were still using bronze.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I hope that we could answer your question along some lines. And now we have approached the end of the lecture, and I'd like to thank all the viewers for being tuned in. So today we discussed the later Vedic period, the economics, society and polity of the later Vedic period. So I thank sir for being here, and also the wonderful listeners. Have a nice day. Thank you so much.